I'd like to invite the members of our first panel onto the stage. Thank you. It is great to see all of you. So you can tell we've got quite a program coming, and you guys are going to really help us kick it off, I think, on a great note. I'm going to just do a quick round of introductions. I'm so honored to have all 7 of you here, just wonderful partners, great collaborators, and tremendous leaders in the West. So, of course, to my left, we have Lisa Grow, the president and CEO of Idaho Power. Lisa, great to see you. Appreciate you being here. To her left, we have got Marty Adams, who's the general manager and chief engineer at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. And then, of course, we've got Deborah Smith, a general manager and CEO of Seattle City Light. And of course, Stefan Bird, the president and CEO of Pacific Power. Stefan, great to see you. Thanks as always for your leadership and engagement with us. Caroline Wynn, who is the CEO of San Diego Gas and Electric. Caroline, thank you, and always appreciated you sort of harbor piloting me back to California. Thank you for all your insights. Steve Powell, the president and CEO of Southern California Edison. Steve, it's been great working with you. You come up in this important new role. Of course, Jim Shetler, the general manager of Bank. Jim, always a source of wisdom whenever I need some help with tough issues. So great to see you here. Just a great panel. Really appreciate you guys. I wanted to just start off. It was nice to hear from Secretary Granholm this morning. She's kind of amazing. She's very vested in the West, right? She's got some California roots. She's always been vested in our success, very focused on infrastructure development. And I was curious, maybe starting with you, Caroline, obviously, I think we're all still trying to process, how different is the world today than it was yesterday? There's a lot happening, folks still counting votes, et cetera. But I think we can all pretty much still count on the fact that there's going to be a tremendous amount of infrastructure change. And I'm interested as what you've been thinking in terms of what some of the most direct opportunities and challenges will be from the Inflation Reduction Act and in your service territory, and what you've been doing to prepare for what's going to be another round of big infrastructure development.
Yeah, well, thanks, Elliot. Thanks for putting this panel together. When you think about what the Inflation Reduction Act is built on, it's really built on energy affordability, grid resiliency, and equity. And at SDG&E, we share those priorities. In fact, earlier this year, we published our enterprise-wide GHG study, The Path to Net Zero, and it was really intended to be a decarbonization roadmap for California. But also, it takes into account the NERC reliability criteria, so keeping the lights on. And there is tremendous opportunity ahead for clean energy in California. In fact, our study by 2045 demonstrates that we'll need 40 gigawatts of energy storage. We'll need 180 plus gigawatts of solar, 20 gigawatts of hydrogen, and 15 gigawatts of offshore wind. So tremendous clean energy opportunities. And the benefit of the Inflation Reduction Act is that our customers will benefit from the incentive tax credits that go along with all of those investments. So when you really think about what's needed for all of the grid resiliency and energy affordability, these incentive tax credits will be very important to lower the cost for customers. In fact, at SDG&E, we'll be tripling the amount of energy storage on our system by the end of next year. And we expect there'll be in the tens of millions of dollars of benefits to customers in 2023. So I think there's huge opportunity with the Inflation Reduction Act, especially on these investments.
Thanks, Caroline. How are you seeing that, Deborah, up north?
I can speak a bit. Everything, Carolyn, that you said, completely agree with. It's an exciting time, and again, thank you for inviting me and having me here. I think two things that I would add to that. One is, as a public utility, the Inflation Reduction Act gave us something that we've been working on for a very, very, very long time, and that is direct pay. And so public power, for the first time, will have the opportunity to participate in those production tax credits and investment tax credits. And it opens up opportunities and possibilities that didn't exist before. So, for instance, Seattle City Light, we just completed an IRP that for the first time that anyone can remember actually has us acquiring new resource in the short term. And suddenly we have the opportunity to look at actually building our own project or owning a project that we did not have that, it did not pencil out before. So that's very exciting. The other thing that I want to say, and I think that we can look at this as a good news or a bad news thing, but the Made in America provisions and some of what's contained in there, while potentially problematic at times, I think it will spur increased manufacturing in this country, which over the long term, how many of us are all dealing with supply chain disruptions right now? Probably all of us. It's a huge deal. And so having more of the things that we need, transformers, relays, et cetera, having those made here, I think will provide a long-term solution to what is currently a very serious short-term problem.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, the supply chain issues are so real. Marty, how about down south?
So thanks, Elliot, and it's great to see everybody here today. I totally agree with Caroline and Deborah, what they said in terms of, the things that we think about with the Act, and especially American manufacturing down the road, what the long-term, significance of that is. One of the things for LA that's really important that we see is this investment in fuels and storage, and particularly in hydrogen. And so, for example, I think probably most people are familiar with the Intermountain Power Project. We're rebuilding a coal plant to a initially combined gassing and green hydrogen plant, ultimately 100% green hydrogen. It'll burn 30% green hydrogen in 2025 when it opens up in just a few years. And so for us, it was really an issue of trying to drive this hydrogen future. And there's $3 a kilogram in that act coming toward projects like that, which will make hydrogen much more affordable. And one of the problems for us is that when we look at long duration energy storage, it's a real challenge for everybody in the industry. And I think that in our case, particularly looking at the studies that we've done in Los Angeles, we need to have firm generation, and we need to have local generation as well. In order to do that and have zero carbon, we have to find a new fuel, and for us that fuel is going to be hydrogen. And so having a driver to drive that cost down, we've already received $500 million for putting the caverns and salt caverns in to store hydrogen, called the ACES project, and it's about 240 megawatts of generating capacity to create green hydrogen, 300 gigawatt hours of storage capability. And so the driver in creating production tax credit is huge, because that is what we need to, for especially the early adopters, to really get over the hump and really make hydrogen competitive with natural gas, help drive the industry, drive the technology, so that we can have an affordable future. We know where we need to go. We just don't know how to get there to pay for it, and it can't be on each individual, agency or city to pay for it as they go. We need federal help, and this, I think, is the answer for that.
Yeah, thanks. It's going to be, I think for all of us, it'd be really interesting just watching the level of mobilization, in the states and at the federal, to make sure that we can really connect the dots and really leverage the investment as effectively as possible. Those all sounds like really important areas, so thank you. Lisa, I was going to start out and turn to you. I think Secretary Granholm talked about breaking out in hives on September 6th. It might not have been quite that bad, but it was close, right? It was definitely intense time. I mean, we all went through this very intense heat wave together, and I was just curious, maybe from your perspective, what were some of the things that you took away from the September heat wave, both in terms of positives and maybe some of the lessons going forward?
That's a great question. And first, I just want to start by just appreciating the fact that we're all together. I see so many faces, old friends and colleagues that I've missed seeing, and I just want to say how much I appreciate everything that you're doing. Charting our path forward, we're going to have to do it together. And I would say that's one of the themes of September 6th. Certainly, we had a kind of a perfect storm. Fires in the area, loss of transmission line, loss of major generation resource, went into EA3. And honestly, were it not for the support of the reliability coordinator, and I got a personal call from Elliot checking out how we're doing. So it really does show the value of sort of the region and the grid and supporting each other when we go through these really hard times. And we have a relatively young operating set of operators that just sort of happens over time. So I call that training. We call those white knuckle days. And so there's a whole new group of people that have lived through something that was really extraordinary and did it really well. So what we are finding, there's sort of well, four things. The first thing is transmission, transmission, transmission. That is something that is just critically important in how we survived. That interconnection and making sure that we had options and could move energy and could restore or resupply when we lost resources on our system. It's just, we are going to need a lot more of that as we roll forward. The other thing that we're seeing is that the load profiles sort of are changing. So we still peak in June, July as the all-time or the peak of the year, but we set records in August and September for our load as well. So, when we've collectively been able to take a breath, we didn't get to this year. And so it just has shifted the way we're thinking about DR and how to deploy that. I mean, it's just making us really rethink what we used to rely upon. The other thing too on transmission is that just the accessibility to transmission that we once were able to get outside of our system that we were not able to get now is something that I think should give us all pause and again reinforces the need for more. But again, just to close, just the regional cooperation, everyone looking out for each other and having that wide area view from the reliability coordinator. We were literally, EA3 had our finger on that button and they were able to sort of guide us through so we didn't have to shed load, and I'm just deeply, deeply appreciative. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. Steve, I want to go to you on this question too. I know we were also in touch during the event. What were some of your key takeaways?
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. So first, we did a lot of improvement over the last 2 years. So the difference between 2022 and 2020, remarkable difference. I don't know that we certainly couldn't have pulled this off in 2020, but energy storage delivered, customers delivered, that's customer demand response programs, conservation, the regional aspects in the markets, delivered, imports coming in. So, and the coordination that you and the team have done with, frankly, all the agencies in California, the utilities, as well as outside, huge difference from the last couple of years. On the lessons, step away a little bit. Talk about the loads and the heat wave, and I think we called it in the end like a 1 in 25 type event, but it feels like we have a 1 in double-digit type event every year. And so I look at it as a resource planner originally, from a load forecasting perspective. I don't know that we're very good at forecasting load anymore, right? We look backwards instead of looking forwards. How do we get climate change into our load forecasts? The second piece is we got to figure out what's the right level of reliability, right? If it was really a 1 in 25 type event, we should expect that there may be some customers that don't get load, but that's not acceptable anymore today. And it certainly won't be acceptable 10 and 15 years from now when you have as much electrification as going to happen. So we have to be thinking about what are the right standards for reliability in the future. And then the third point I'll just touch on is timing was a little bit unfortunate. California passed a law about by 2035 having 100% electric vehicle sales days before that heat event happened. And so the message that our customers take away is you want all these electric vehicles, can the grid actually deliver? And so part of its messaging, the grid can deliver it. It's about when you charge, how you charge. There's so many pieces that go into it, but customers have to believe in what we're doing. And we have to both prove that we can do it, as well as message it in the right way. So those are my lessons from the events.
Caroline, I'm just going to go to you also on this. I know there was a lot of texting and back and forthing throughout that whole event. I was curious, a couple of your key takeaways as well.
Well, again, I agree with everything that's been said, but these warmer temperatures are more the norm now. And this was a multi-day. We had 10 days of excessive heat, alerts, 10 consecutive days. So, and you pair that with, we also had our own wildfire that was threatening an interstate transmission line. And if that wasn't enough, we had the Tropical Storm K that came up from Baja California that had over 100-mile-an-hour winds in our high fire threat area. We thought there might have to do a public safety power shutoff, but luckily there was a little bit of rainfall and moisture that came with it. So it was really this multi-climate driven events that I think are becoming more the norm that we do need to prepare for. I would say some of the positives is that, yes, there was significantly more resources, but also I think that instead of planning for an average temperature, we planned for extreme temperature, which required us to do more procurement And I think at the end of the day, that was an absolute right thing to do. We've talked about better communication. We were having daily, hourly calls, with the CPUC, with the governor's office, with you, Elliot, and your teams, with the other utilities. And I felt like we were very, very aligned in how we did it. And I think that we also saw more demand response, right? I think in 2020, the last time there was a blackout, that we had a couple hundred megawatts of demand response. It was over 1,000 megawatts of demand response. So I think those are really the positives. My one lesson learned is just one word, and that is more. Right? We need more resources. We need to continue to, at least as you said, build more transmission, more energy storage. We need to do more demand response. I mean, luckily an Amber Alert came out with minutes to spare, and a couple thousand megawatts came off the grid. But California is the 5th largest economy, and that was really, I think there were some prayers said, right, about what was going to happen. We need more fire hardening, right? We have all these transmission corridors that are dually located. So I would just say we need to do more communications. We're doing a lot now. We need to do more with customers, with ourselves and our agencies. So that's my one lesson learned.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think when we think about the CAISO, we obviously operate about 80% of the grid in California, but we have SMUD and LA both operating significant portions of the system. Marty, I feel like the level of coordination and communication with LADWP is really just working so well, so appreciative. I'm just curious your perceptions as well. You guys were doing a ton to help keep the lights on during that period.
Well, thanks, Elliot. And it's different being from the perspective of we had a lot of power during the heat storm and or heat wave, whatever we call it these days, and the new normal, I guess, is what it is. And it's a weird situation to be in. So looking from the other side of the fence, LA's been fully resourced for power, and we'll luckily been able to put power back on the grid for other people in the state. One of our plans is to stay that way and to not, I guess it's good that we're slow on some things because we don't get rid of stuff. And so, we still have our full generating capacity and we don't want to lose that capability both for our own growth and the fact that we recognize that there's a bigger need and a bigger market and game that we want to play in. But I look at this, first of all, communication was huge. And I think that versus a couple years ago, it was so much more improved. And one of the things that's important, I think, for everybody in this industry is to get your operators connected. And that's something that Elliot and I have talked about, is that making sure people in control rooms know each other. Because when you're looking out for yourself, it's one thing. When you're looking out for your friends and the people you have a relationship with, it changes everything. And coming from a long-term operating background myself, it's, having the relationships, boots on the ground, and knowing what people are dealing with and having those lines of communication is immensely important. And so I think that's something that we plan to work together with the CAISO, and I would encourage everyone to really work that so that there's a better sense of camaraderie from the folks that are actually making it happen. Interestingly, looking at putting power on the grid, one of the things that we experience is making sure that whoever's getting that power is ready for it, that everybody understands the game plan. There's so many markets and variables out there. You got to make sure that everyone actually sees the same picture and the same kind of goals and is plan to meet them together. And I think about with batteries and talk about battery storage and how we had a lot better situation. One of the things that we look at, we had a lot of generating running at night, and so those batteries, a lot of them are recharged with fossil fuel. So what happens in a few years from now when those plants that are now recharging batteries to make it look good don't exist anymore? And so I look at LA's peak. At LA's peak a few years ago, we had over 6,200 megawatts or 6,400 megawatts of demand. 5,000 megawatts was fossil fuel driven, and that's all supposed to go away. And so, we look at what we're experiencing now and is normal, but we're going to change the backstop of that normal altogether. And then with transmission lines going down and fires, again, it underscores the need for local generation, and you've got to have that to have reliability. I don't think there's any way to engineer around that.
Yeah. Stefan, I'd be interested in your perspective. I think that there was some very intense moments for all of us. What was your sort of take on how we came through that event?
Yeah, so for those of you unfamiliar with Pacific Corp, we cover 10 states, and so we're constantly looking at really the entire West. And First, I would just have to echo all the comments that have been made. I mean, we were seeing stress all around us. Frankly, the last 3 summers in a row, we've had EA3s all around us. So these 1 in 25 or 1 in 100 that are happening every year, that is certainly top of mind. How do we build a more resilient system? And I couldn't agree more with Caroline's comments that we need more of everything. We're certainly pursuing that at Pacific Corp. I mean, thousands of megawatts of new solar, wind, battery storage. I've got 11 pump storage projects we're pursuing, an advanced nuclear project with storage, and transmission that has to connect all those things. But I think what's also interesting, we haven't yet maybe touched on, is our grid operators need tools to see what's available and to transact, and to do that very quickly, in a crisis. And there's no doubt that the EIM delivered, in that moment on September 6th and really, enabled our grid operators across the West to keep the lights on and avoid a challenge. And what spurs us to continue that evolution. It's great to see, whatever it is now, 80, 90% of the market part of the EIM. But there's more that we can do to further empower our grid operators to be able to keep the lights on, save money. I mean, seriously, $3 billion to date, is super exciting, and to deliver that decarbonization goal that's top of mind for all of us. But I also just want to echo the collaboration, communication comments. I mean, as I think about the market, we're all not just market participants. I mean, we're really members of a community. Every single person, the companies that is represented on the panel today, we're partnered with in so many respects. I think of Lisa and Idaho Power on the transmission development front, that's connecting the West. That's again so essential for every one of us individually and together. I think Caroline and SDG&E's best practices in the wildfire mitigation arena, the WRAP, all the parties are involved in the resource adequacy program. I mean, it's a step change that we have moved together, and so I'm really optimistic about our future as we lean into that collaboration.
Thanks, Stefan, and thanks for all of your observations. Actually, Stefan, I want to stay with you on this thread. I mean, obviously, you've been with EIM since the very inception point. And, a lot of commitment and engagement there. It's been about a year, I think, since we had our EDAM forum. And I think, we've certainly come a long way in working with, many of the people in this room, quite frankly, a really diverse array of stakeholders to try to design the market. And I'm curious, as we approach now the final stages of the market design, I'd like to maybe hear your perspective on, how are we doing, at this stage in sort of designing a day-ahead market that can take that next step in bringing real value in cost savings for your customers.
Yeah, sure. Well, again, it's really thrilling to be here. It's been so many years since I was here, and I was probably part of that. It's a much smaller group with, nowhere close to $3 billion saved. And so I think that footprint really speaks for itself, and it really starts with the EIM. What we've seen succeed in developing markets and better collaboration across the West hasn't been that Big Bang theory that was tried in the decades prior. We're seeing success with this incremental approach, and we're now poised at this next big opportunity to lean into the day-ahead market. And again, while we're motivated at Pacific Corp to lean into the further expansion, enhancement of the EIM and the day-ahead market, is for those 3 core things that I just mentioned. It's about resilience. It's about saving our customers money. It's about achieving net zero. And I think it's important to recognize in the EIM, all those savings go to our customers. There's no shareholder profit. That's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because that's our mission, is to deliver low cost, reliable, increasingly clean energy. And together we're making that happen. I think about how we show up in the day-ahead market design. And, for Pacific Corp, we want a transparent, durable, similar principles to the EIM where there was, easy entry, easy exit. It is a special design. No one's done this, in the rest of the country. I mean, the West is approaching this differently where, we're building a market where all the balancing authority areas maintain their reliability obligations, honor their open access transmission tariffs, and can, take advantage of all this diversity and the tremendous grid that we have as we continue to expand it and generate even more benefits. I mean, it's really exponential in nature as we both grow the market and add the tools that our operators can use. So, we are optimistic for that future and really see this as a moment, that we want to seize. So appreciate all the hard work by the CAISO team and frankly all the stakeholders that have been leaning in. Again, I can remember those early days with the EIM and what it took to make that happen. And you've got that very similar, just intense engagement, high sense of urgency, which thank you, Mark Rothleader and the whole staff at the CAISO for really taking on this effort with the sense of urgency it deserves.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Stefan. Jim, I want to turn to you as well. I know you and I have been engaging in dialogue for years together as well about market evolution. I'd love to hear, how are you feeling about, EDAM from the bank perspective?
All right. Well, first of all, Elliot, thank you for inviting me and having an opportunity to participate. And then secondly, I would be remiss if I didn't, on behalf of my largest member, SMUD, welcome everybody to Sacramento. I hope you enjoy your stay here. Spend money, please. So let's talk about EDAM. Elliot, as I look at the ISO and EDAM development, I recognize that the ISO has a real advantage here in that you have an established and known market platform. And I think for those of us that are EIM entities, that's going to allow us an opportunity at pretty cost-effective manner in order to move into that day-ahead market. So I think that's a real advantage. I also recognize you have some disadvantages because you have an established market platform, and that is not easily as flexible as starting from scratch. And so there will be stakeholders that are not going to be happy with what comes out of EDAM and its design, and I think that's just something we need to recognize. From banks' perspective, in looking at the advantages and the disadvantages, we think the advantages outweigh those disadvantages. The other thing I would like to recognize and comment both to you and Mark Rothleader and your team is I look at the collaboration that's been done on EDAM over the last 4 years, I think, since we started this evolution. The outreach has been very proactive. I think it's a new model for the ISO. I would like to promote that for the future in that you are out there asking the stakeholders what they want, listening, not always giving everybody what they want, but at least trying to understand and trying to accommodate. At the end of the day, I don't think everybody's going to sign up for EDAM. That's just a reality. But I do think that it is a step in the right direction. I think it allows those of us in California to partner with those of our entities outside of California and try to move forward with a market that works for us. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Yeah, really thoughtful. Appreciate that. And Lisa, you and I too, we've had ridden the roller coaster together as well on a lot of these things. I'm curious, how are you? What's your take in terms of the development of the market, and is it moving in the right direction?
Yeah, thank you. And I want to say thanks again to Stefan, you and all of Pacificor that really sort of led the way on EIM. That was a big move, and it has shown that it made it super easy for us to join. So we're happy when you guys clear the way for everybody, and it was like no big deal when we joined.
We're better together. Thank
yes,
you.
yeah, for sure. But so we really appreciate how open and transparent the process has been. It's my team feels like their issues are being heard. Certainly, we have to continue to demonstrate that there's benefit to our customers. I mean, there's one thing to say you want to show up for the region, but I can't, for my regulators that are in the room, we aren't going to bring something that doesn't show benefit to our customers, even when it has benefits to the region, which we believe there is. Certainly, we have concerns about transmission valuation, so we want to make sure that that's included in the solution. Again, that's sort of a subset of the first. And then we're concerned about resource adequacy. So those are some of the issues that we continue to have dialogue about. And so I think I like the incremental approach because again, I can't tell you how many of my 35 years have been spent in hotel rooms trying to bang out what an RTO looks like, and we're going to get it all at once, and it's just never happened that way. And so this is the first time that we really can demonstrate the value and what we've achieved and what we believe is yet to come. So we see great benefit, but there are still some things we've got to work through. But we've again, to be able to go in or come out easily is one of those things that really helps us be able to lean in and try some things on, and if it doesn't work, we can do something else. But I think I agree with Jim. I think people will make the choices that are right for them, and we'll figure out what that looks like as we go forward. But I appreciate the process. You guys have been extremely accessible and really been great partners. So thank you for that.
No, we really appreciate it. And I know as we work across the course of November to kind of take that last big round of input and kind of do the fine tuning, looking forward to that final round of engagement. So yeah, thanks a lot, Lisa. Steve, I want to ask you as well, Edison inside California has just been really engaged. We've really appreciated the resources you guys have put on this. I'm curious to hear the perspective from Edison's side.
Yeah. So Elliot, I'd say ditto to everything that everybody else said. But it does start with the collaboration and really the engagement from everybody. I mean, your team's done a great job to listen, to get things set up. But really, for us to want to invest more resources and put our team forward, we want to see that people are engaged, people are working towards something, and we've seen that throughout the process, which is why we want to continue to push and see how far we can get it, how quickly we can get it there. So really excited by the progress that we've seen so far. Lisa, to your point, there's little pieces that we still have to work through. They won't all get solved perfectly, right? There's no perfect answer to designing these markets that work for everybody. These markets, though, are going to provide value to the region as a whole and to a lot of customers. And value is better reliability, lower cost. And so we're committed to figuring out, what else do we need to work around the margins to get it across the finish line, to get something implemented, and that as many people can come along as possible. It'll probably be a start, and then it will grow over time. And we'll make adjustments to it, I'm sure, over time as well. So really encourage, and most importantly, just thank you to all of our partners and everybody else that's been engaged in the process. It's exciting, and it gets our team energized to also be engaging just as much.
Yeah. No, thanks. I just know everybody has so many things on their plate, so that the commitment of time and resources. Deborah, I want to turn to you for the next. We're going to turn to governance, and as a current Northwesterner, as a former Northwesterner, and maybe still at the little piece of my heart up there, I want to kick in with governance. And the last decade, we've seen a co-evolution of market design and governance. Last year we saw the move to joint authority over the EIM rules between the CAISO Board of Governors and the WAM governing body. The Governance Review Committee appears to be, trending towards consensus that the next step in this evolution is to apply the joint authority model to EDAM. I'm curious what your perspective is on that approach to EDAM governance, and how does some of the work that's implicated by Assembly Member Holden's ACR 188, which we'll hear a little bit more about later today, factor into your thinking?
Yeah, thank you. So two things. One is, Stefan, I still remember where I was. It was one of those moments when PAC announced that you were joining the EIM, because the Northwest had spent, and this, Elliot, so much time and energy on, various versions of market design and market development. And then when the dominoes started to fall, it was like, ooh, there we go. Caliphobia in play. And so from a governance perspective, I think that the joint authority model is great. The other thing I wanted to say, and I apologize for this, but, some of us knew Therese Hampton, who was chairing at one point the GRC and did amazing work moving us towards this joint authority model. And she passed away the end of September, very unexpectedly, very sadly, and that is still a loss. And so when I think about governance, I cannot think about governance without thinking about our colleague, Therese. And so putting that out there. But so what do I think? I think that the progress is important. I think that there's been a lot of discussion here about collaboration, and collaboration requires give and take. And I certainly see that California and the CAISO, and I appreciate the Board of Governors that has allowed that to emerge and to happen. I think that for me, I believe that the joint authority model is sufficient and paves the way to join the EDAM. We've not made a decision yet, and we are very close to doing so. We're in the process of deciding how to decide. How about that? And that's fun. And Jim knows this, but I don't see the governance as an impediment to taking the next step with California. And I mean, we have had a marvelous experience with the EIM, and it has been incredibly helpful to us. And we had the heat last year and probably wouldn't have made it through that without CAISO, and without the EIM. Ultimately, you know, I was a finance major in college long ago and far away, but I believe in markets. So I do believe in markets, and so I do worry because this is an established market. Jim, you did a good job saying the good and the bad, the established market. To me, it has always been a logical place to go. But I know that many of my colleagues in the Northwest absolutely see even joint authority. The joint authority won't work for an RTO. And, you know, even as we sit and engage and we talk about CAISO and Markets Plus, you know, Markets Plus may have a different governance structure today, but we're all on a path to an RTO. And at the end of the day, that governance structure over there is not going to be in place when the RTO dominoes fall. So that's how I feel. I feel like great work, great progress, more to do, and I'm really anxious. I'd love to hear from you. I know it's not going to happen, but I'd love to hear from you about, I'd love to hear from you about how the political events in California, even last night's elections, you know, how they may impact further growth, further movement.
Yeah. You know, we're gonna have a whole segment on that later today, and I think we'll get a chance to talk a bit more about that. So yeah, but it's good to kind of understand what's the next step ahead of us, and then where do we need to continue evolving? So I think that's the right frame. Jim, I wanted to ask you the same question because you've been able to view this from a public power perspective, but also housed right within California and sort of at interesting fault blocks. How do you view it?
Yeah, I kind of view myself as the inside California, outside person. But, you know, when I think about EDAM, and when we launched the discussion on this 4 years ago, the number one issue that everybody raised was governance. And we've spent a lot of time talking about that over the last 4 years. I do think the enhanced joint authority model is the right approach for now. Clearly, we all agree that if we're going to go to an RTO, we have to look at an independent governance structure. There's no question about that. But I do think that the joint authority model does provide us with a level of independent oversight, more than we have today. The other thing it does is it provides a bit of a bridge to allow us to have the dialogue that we definitely need to have within California and with our neighbors outside of California on what is California's view of joining markets and broader market participation. Where are we on this? And we need to have that honest discussion, which leads me to Assembly and through Resolution 188. You know, my hope that coming out of the report that's submitted to the legislature in early next year will be a stimulus for having that dialogue. What is California's role in broader markets? What is the ISO's role in that if we are going to do that? And if the ISO is going to have a role, then what does that governance structure need to look like? Those are really in-depth discussions that we need to have. And I think, like I said, the enhanced joint authority allows us a little bit of wiggle room and some time to have those discussions while we can still move forward with the day-ahead market.
Yeah. Steve, I want to go to you on this question as well, because again, this is another area where you guys have been very, very engaged and very thoughtful on it. I'm curious kind of your read on both of those dimensions.
Yeah, so with respect to EDAM and the joint authority model, first, you have to give a lot of credit to the Governance Review Committee for getting the joint authority model set up on WEAM in the first place, right? And I think that's been really successful. And so, you know, simple enhancements to that, if it works for EDAM, seems to work for us and others, it makes a ton of sense. I don't know that there's a lot of argument there. The idea, though, that we're marching towards more and more integrated, larger markets, Maybe at some point in RTO in an incremental way, Stefan seems to be working, and I think we need to keep going down that path. I think to Deb's point earlier, the RTO governance is a whole other monster, right? A joint authority may be a piece of that, but it's going to be, there's a lot of components. You have to figure out how you bring your state regulators on, and maybe you need a board of state regulators there. You've got to have an independent board for the RTO. You've got to figure out how you get the stakeholders in. There's so many other elements as you think about an RTO that in EDAM or in WING don't do, right? They're just a market. They're not transmission planning and expansion and generation interconnection and reliability everything else that goes in. So we've got a lot of work to do, but the collaboration, the engagement and interest is there that I think we can work to something. That's why we've been really interested in, hey, can we begin to put forward some ideas on models and take feedback that's not, we don't want to push a California model. What we all are trying to accomplish over the next 10, 20 years doesn't work without broader markets. California can't solve California problems, and Nevada can't just solve its own problems, and Arizona can't. Nobody can solve everything they need to solve. We need diversity in resources. We need transmission across there. There's so many things that have to happen that we have to figure out how to get to a larger, more integrated market to be able to get where we want in 20 years. Because affordability is really important, but I just don't think you could do it period, without better integration. And having our operators work well together and know each other is great. Having us know each other, but we can't be picking up the phone to call and solve everything every time. We need some sort of organized, integrated markets that systematize and put process around it and design the thing. And so the progress on the governance is a good step forward. There'll be a lot more to do on RTOs.
No, that's very well said. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Marty, I just want to ask you this question before we turn to our final round. You guys are, again, deeply engaged in this process, which has been super helpful, made our proposal a lot stronger. Curious on the governance side as well, how are you viewing that from the LA's perspective?
So, it's interesting. First of all, Steve's right. We got to get past this informal how things work out to where there's actual plan that it actually works out without all of us personally intervening every time the sun comes out for too long. So, which is the way it is right now, which is good for us, but bad for all of our constituents. I look at this. This is like the energy version of It Takes a Village. I think we're coming to reality that it's going to take this broader group of people working together to share power and route it around. LA's been a short-term player in the EIM market, but it's been really valuable for us, and we've really enjoyed that. And we see how EDAM could be the next step forward. We've got some complications. We have work out some details with OAT and also people on our balancing authority and other things that we have to work through. But we think that the governance structure that's been put forward is looks like a good one. And for us, it's always a challenge about autonomy and participating, because we want to be able to still have say over when we put generation on, not have someone tell us to turn a 60-year unit on and off and on and off, because I know that can happen. Currently, if you're subject to somebody else's authority, but as someone who owns their own generation as well as distribution, we want to make sure that we don't lose control of that and then harm the citizens who paid for that over the years. And so that's a challenge for us, but I think that it's on the right track. I think making use of all the power resources that are created in the West, so that we use them all to the best ability is the right way to go. The one thing I would caution is that as demands grow, as we electrify, and we're becoming better at demand response, we're becoming better at routing every electron around the West. We got to make sure that we keep an eye on as that demand grows. We're not all counting on each other to use the same amount of power. And so we've got to make sure that we continue to create enough new power to put on the grid, however big that grid is. Otherwise, we're all going to think we got a backstop from somewhere, and 3 other people might be using that same thing. And I think that's the danger, is as you spread that out, you got to really coordinate to make sure there's enough resource to go around at the end of the day.
We've heard a couple of themes, about automation. And Deborah, why don't you, please.
I just wanted to tag on that and say, I think you're going to have a presentation on it, but the WEC reliability audit that just came out, the resource adequacy, boy, Marty, really supports exactly what you've said. And there's the fact that the new resources we are adding are variable changes the equation, just like it's kind of the same thing as the weather and looking forward versus back. And so I don't think we've all figured out exactly how to best operate within this new world.
Yeah.
Go ahead, 10 more seconds.
Yeah, please.
So one thing I was going to say, the one thing we've got, I talk to all the folks that work in every aspect in the power world. We have got alphabet soup of organizations and studies and things going on. So no matter what you do, this has got to come together in one place. We can't have 15 different versions of markets going on and expect them to coordinate. So I think it's got to resolve itself into one entity somehow, somewhere.
One thread. Yeah. One thread I wanted just to add, I was just thinking about, whether it was the, cell phone alert on the 6th and the phone calls and the texts, there's still some, 20th century technology being deployed here, right? And one of the things I've mentioned to some folks is when Mark Rothleader and I were sitting there through the entire heat wave event, just watching the pie screens and watching the operation, we sort of went through this thought exercise where we were continuously trying to imagine how different would things have been if we'd actually had the day-ahead market up and running at that point, right? And just the ability to have had that day-ahead look across the footprint into the sufficiency of the entire footprint and to be able to run a security-constrained economic dispatch across that footprint and have the confidence that, hey, we've got some entities that are suffering, but there are energy transfers that are available. And that right there would have just calmed everything down. It would have kind of kept us out of EEA watches and EEA ones. That, of course, has price impacts and cost impacts. And then just the confidence of the footprint sufficiency, I think, would have provided much stronger incentives for people to bid their generation in, right? I think all of us that have operated balancing authorities, you know what it's like to sort of hold your own stuff in reserve. But here, the incentives for liquidity, I think, would have been much stronger. And the automation of that, and the visibility and the transparency, I think, just would have been much more beneficial. So that's why we're going to be, working so hard here these last few weeks. I think we've got the final version of the straw proposal. We'll be taking comment on that, I think, to the 22nd, and then we're going to take a really nice opportunity to present the sum total of the region's work to our Board of Governors and the WM governing body in December, and then start getting real about wrapping up the final steps. So your guys' engagement, I also want to just, each of you, your staffs as well, you've kind of talked, but your staffs have just been unbelievable. The level of time and commitment has been deeply, deeply helpful to make it. This is a proposal that's really had a tremendous amount of input, made a lot better. So I appreciate that. We have just enough time for a final round. We're going to kind of do a little speed round. I'm going to actually start over with Jim. I just couldn't resist, a little crystal balling, maybe. But just a quick question. As we look to the future and try to predict what the Western energy landscape is going to look like 5 years from now, what do each of you think is going to be sort of one of the single biggest changes we're going to see? What's sort of your snapshot?
There will be day-ahead markets in operation, broader. Unfortunately, maybe more than one, but that's a reality. I think we'll still be challenged with making sure we have enough dispatchable resources to manage the critical times. But I'm hoping within 5 years that we have identified what is that transition piece to get us there that will allow us to operate reliably while still trying to meet our different goals in clean energy. 5 years from now, we'll be 2 years away from the mandates in the Nevada and Colorado legislation. So I have to believe that those are going to happen. There's going to be some kind of a plan going forward for an RT participation. I think that we will see continued work on resource adequacy and consolidation of resource adequacy. And I'm going to predict that California will join REP within the next 5 years. Right. And then lastly, the one prediction I have is probably the item I have most control over and the least success in managing, and that is the fact that Jim Shetler will be retired within 5 years.
Yeah, all right. Well, you'll have left a fabulous legacy. Thanks, Jim. Steve?
So lot of what Jim said around EDAM in place, hopefully with the same scope that we see in WEAM today at that point. Maybe not a perfect, here's exactly what it looks like, but definitely more integrated than it is today. Not fully integrated, still a lot of work to do. Maybe one element I think I've seen and want to continue to see, so my crystal ball says you'll hear a lot less conversation about California and everybody else, California's wants versus everybody else, and it's a lot more of a regional view on things. And so I think we're making progress there, and I hope to continue to advance that.
Fabulous. Thanks. Caroline?
Well, going third, I would agree with everything that Jim and Steve have talked about. If you ask me my crystal ball and what I would like to see, I just think, as transportation and electrification gain momentum, I think that at least in California, we're gonna have to do some work, and I know there's work that's in progress around rate reform, right? Today, 100% of electricity pricing is done on a volumetric basis, and if we're going to incent electrification, what customers want to pay 30, 40, 50, 60 cents a kilowatt hour, based on whatever time of day you're using that energy. So I think we're going to see a lot of work on modernizing rates, because these are rates that were put together in the late 70s and 80s during the oil embargo that was really meant to dissuade customers from using energy, and we're in a new and different world. I would also, though, think that I'm going to take something Steve said and talked about, our load is changing. Right, everything's changing. Our load forecasts need to be relooked at. I think even Marty, something you said, and that's our import levels. Right, we were lucky. I think we were very fortunate on September 6th because the Northwest and Arizona didn't have the same kind of extreme events that we had in California. Had they, it probably would be a different story. So I would hope that we're relooking at kind of the planning criteria, the forecast methodology, and modernizing that. I would say lastly, I think that, with electrification and even with, some of these overnight high temperatures that we had in San Diego, we're starting to see the impacts of customers adopting electrification, electric cars for sure, and started to see some problems on some of our distribution circuits. So I think there'll be a lot more work on that.
Thank you.
All right. I got to end on a positive note, because I look at the West and, you think of the abundance of diverse clean energy resource that we have access to, and it's the best in the world. We really have an enormous opportunity. Yes, the challenges are extreme. Supply chain issues are going to get in the way. We'll have different policy issues that kind of some help and some are not so, but we really have this extraordinary opportunity to achieve net zero, vis-a-vis the expansion of the grid, the modernization of the grid, and the addition of all the above, clean energy resources, and that's what we'll be pursuing. I need a little more than 5 years. I like the 5-year target. That looks very promising with everything that we already have in motion, but it really is going to take all of us working together to satisfy that desired outcome by all of our customers, and really are better together. So again, thanks for everyone leaning in.
Thanks, Stefan.
So I think the die is cast with respect to electrification of transportation, but I think very quickly Washington State made some changes yesterday, or the state building code, around electrification of our physical spaces and of our housing stock. And I think that scares me. It's exciting and it scares me. There's a huge opportunity there. If you think about, as people electrify their homes, the opportunity for us to develop, put in super hot water heaters, put in heat pumps where we have some control over those, and we're developing our own peaking plant in a distributed energy way. I think that's going to happen. I don't know if it will happen in 5 years, because the worry is, just like on the electrification side, we're mandating changes, but there's a lot of money for us, but there's not sufficient funds, I believe, at this point, available for the people that have to make changes to their homes who can't afford it. And so the notion of maintaining equity as we move through this transformation, I think it needs more attention. And I think if we can figure that out, that will become a huge part of our solution. And that's always been the vision, right? On the other side of the meter, there's an awful lot of opportunity. So I hope we're making big progress towards that in 5 years.
All right, Marty?
So I hope in 5 years that we figured out a way through the regulatory and permitting process to get to the future we need. Otherwise, we're going to talk about the same thing in 5 years from now. And I think that, in the world of time is money, I mean, we spend a lot of time trying to get to projects that we all know we need and all have to be done. So I think hopefully in 5 years, we'll see that we have a clearer path toward actually building the future. To what Caroline said about rates, this is a huge issue. I mean, and the very first thing we talked about was federal money coming in. I think we need a huge infusion of federal dollars to make this change for the future. There's no way ratepayers of the West, whether California or beyond, are going to be able to withstand the kind of increases they need if this is all on their backs. And I think that we have to recognize that. And people want to flip the switch and have the power come on. We're going to have to find a way to do demand response that's somewhat invisible to customers. People are not going to want to walk back to a half-charged car or find out that their house is 90 degrees when they walk inside because someone turned the air off. So we've got to find a way to make this invisible to the public, who also have to pay for it, or we're going to lose their support. So I think that that's the challenge in the next 5 years, and I hope that we find a way to make the things that we're using now as solutions, make them palatable to the public so that this whole thing really can move forward and can be affordable and we have acceptance. Because if we lose that support, then we've really got a problem.
Big issue. Lisa, you want to take us home?
Well, boy, I don't know if I have a ton to add, but I do think that we've shown that an incremental approach can work. So, what is always sort of, we've had big ideas, but they collapse under their own weight because we haven't been able to bite them off, one kind of chunk at a time. And I think EIM shows that we can, and it certainly has been a wild success. And so I look forward to that. I do think that EDAM will form. And I don't know what to say about RTO. Idaho is watching carefully, but we're sort of, going to see how EDAM shakes out before we take that next jump. But I hope to God that we are celebrating flipping the switch on B2H and maybe Gateway West.
Yeah.
So more transmission. So please join me. There will be lots of champagne,
Yeah.
but
All right.
It's been a long time coming.
Okay. Well, I know that, first of all, you guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate the dialogue, really appreciate your leadership, the partnership, and just really looking forward to making real progress together here in the months and years ahead. So thank you all. And with that, please join me in a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you guys so much.